Hi, my name is Carissa Fletcher. I'm the project manager with Brain Injury Canada. I wanted to welcome you back to our Caregiver Support webinar series and introduce our amazing guest today. She is Victoria Lougheed. She's the Education and Learning Lead for the Family Caregivers of BC. Thank you for joining us today, Victoria.
Thanks, Carissa. It's an absolute pleasure. I'm looking forward to presenting some of the services we offer with Family Caregivers of BC in hopes that resources can be shared, information can be shared, and caregivers across the country can learn from what we do, and hopefully organizations can pick up some of the tools and tricks as well. So today I'm going to be talking about the role of family and friends caregivers, as well as presenting some of the services that we offer through Family Caregivers of BC to caregivers within the province of BC. If you live outside of BC, there are other caregiving organizations you can reach out to, as well as reaching out to our host organization, Brain Injury Canada, for supports and resources. If you do have any questions, please do reach out to me or give our caregiving coaching line a call, and we can direct you or support you as best as we can. Okay? So the role of family and friend caregivers is diverse and complex. But the first thing that I'd like to do is take a moment to acknowledge the land on which I live. I'm humbled to be speaking from the unceded land of the Lougheed and Wasanich people, who are part of the Coast Salish First Nations. I wish to acknowledge and thank these people, also known as the Songhees and Esquimalt people, for allowing me to live and work on their territory. Many of us are privileged to be able to work on the land of First Nations, and we always want to make sure at Family Caregivers that we're speaking to that privilege. So who are we? What do we do? Family Caregivers of BC is a charity that has been dedicated to the well-being of family caregivers for more than 30 years. Since 2010, the organization has expanded from a local organization in the Victoria area to a provincial level, focusing on caregiver needs, resources, supports, and service across the province. We are connected to the BC Ministry of Health as part of the BC Patients as Partners initiative. What we do is a number of different things. We have three pillars. One is caregiver support, and through that pillar, we try to provide information, referral, and navigation support within the healthcare system. We also provide one-to-one caregiver coaching. We have support groups that happen both virtually and in person. We've just recently returned to some in-person support groups thanks to COVID restrictions lifting up. And we also provide online resources through our Learning Center on our website. In terms of education, we have those online resources I just mentioned. We also host 4 webinars a year for family caregivers and 2 for healthcare providers. We have a podcast, and we have 22 Facebook Lives a year. And we do regular events and presentations across the province. In terms of collaboration and engagement, we work towards health system improvement and partnership improvement by representing caregivers on various boards and partnerships. We also participate in research, and we try our best to inform policy as we can in those processes. For today's presentation, I'm going to be focusing on what we look at in terms of defining a family caregiver, what the role and scope is of caregiving, the daily activities of providing care, some common caregiver needs, an introduction to the idea of building a circle of care to support caregivers, and then Family Caregivers of BC resources. Starting with the definition, we look at caregivers in a very broad sort of way. For us, a caregiver is a family or friend who provides care and support to someone living with disease, disability, or frailty due to aging. The role of family caregivers is mutually determined, both by the person receiving care and by the person giving the care. In terms of what does that look like for caregiving support provided across the province and across the country, we have determined that for every hour a healthcare professional spends providing care, family caregivers provide 10. So when you think of it, The healthcare professional is up at the tip of the iceberg, and the caregiver, family, or friend is down there under the water doing that hidden 90% of the work to support a care recipient. It's a big job. It looks like in BC, it's 28% of our population is providing family or friend caregiver support. And that works out to about 1.37 million people just in British Columbia. That number across Canada is much, much bigger. When it comes to looking at what it takes to be a caregiver, Rosalind Carter, as former US First Lady, has a beautiful quote. There are 4 kinds of people in this world: those who've been caregivers, those who are caregivers, those who will be caregivers, and those who will need them. It's a quote that really kind of brings it all into perspective for us. At some point in your life, you can expect to be a caregiver, and you can also expect to receive caregiving support from someone you know. As we move through the stages of life, it's just part of the process. In terms of the caregiver relationship, our executive director, Barb McLean, speaks beautifully to this. Many experience times of profound connection, deeply meaningful and positive experiences that are life-changing. Being a caregiver means caring because of relationship. Few people remain untouched by this deeply personal experience, and it is so true. Caregiving is such a cathartic experience. It's so entrenched and enmeshed in the relationships we have with our loved ones throughout our lifespan. But there are impacts to caregiving, and some of those impacts are on our physical health, some are on our mental health. So definitely studies have been done that demonstrate increased levels of depression and anxiety, increased rates of insomnia, increased chronic health conditions. In fact, chronic health happens at twice the rate of the general population. There are also immune system compromises that come from some of that stress and insomnia that goes along with caregiving. In addition, back injuries and other physical injuries do tend to come along with caregiving, especially as we are looking at older caregivers providing care for their spouses. As folks are moving in through their 70s and into their 80s, their bodies are taking a hit in the act of caregiving, and often physical injuries result from that. So there are a lot of challenges and stresses that I mentioned that go along with caregiving. One of the biggest challenges is overload and exhaustion. Oftentimes, caregiving is an isolating experience. Caregivers find themselves trying to do it all and tend not to ask for help or support from family members or loved ones. Often caregivers struggle with setting boundaries and saying no. Caregivers often struggle to even identify what their boundaries might be because they don't necessarily see themselves as caregivers. One of the early things we often do with folks here in BC is we help them identify that, yep, you're a caregiver and there are things you can do and things that you can't. And it's good to know what those things are so that you can have appropriate conversations with your family, with your care recipient, and with their healthcare team. In addition, there can be complex family dynamics involved in caregiving that can make the role challenging, difficult conversations to have, different levels of contribution from different family members that can add to stress. As well, some of the challenges can involve lack of support from family or friends, perceived lack of support from the healthcare system, feeling overwhelmed by the emotions you experience as a caregiver, ongoing grief and loss, especially as you're providing care for someone whose health is degenerating over time. There's what we call the grief along the way that can be difficult to navigate. And then there are financial and legal ramifications and concerns to caregiving. Sometimes caregiving requires that you stop working to be able to provide that care for someone, and that can have an economic effect. In addition, there are significant changes that may happen along the caregiving trajectory. that may have financial impact. Navigating the healthcare system is not easy, and sometimes it can be difficult to feel that you have a voice in that process. One of the supports that we provide is along those lines, helping you feel seen and heard as a caregiver. I did mention isolation earlier, and then one of the common outcomes that happens with caregiving is caregivers tend to stop taking good care of themselves. They put themselves last on the list of things to do, and they never get to the bottom of the list. And so caregiver health can degenerate over time as well. So signs of caregiver stress can show up in some interesting ways. We can often see denial, nothing's wrong, everything's fine. A lot of anger about situations, anger at not being able to get off wait lists or get in to see that specialist when your care recipient needs them. Social withdrawal, often you're just tired. You don't have the energy to get out there with your friends the way that you used to. Or the withdrawal may happen because you can't leave your care recipient alone, but you don't have other resources to put into place to give yourself a break. Anxiety is very common, depression is common, exhaustion comes up a lot. Insomnia and sleeplessness is very commonly reported. And then there are the emotional reactions, the difficulty concentrating, and health problems that we mentioned earlier. All of these are signs of caregiver stress. And when we work with caregivers, we work on identifying these signs and then helping them come up with tools and resources to help alleviate these stressors. So as an organization, we work with caregivers to help identify their needs and strengthen their network of support. There are a number of different ways that we go about this, and they can include one-to-one coaching, support through regular connections via our caregiver support lines, connecting them with a support group, be it virtual or online. We also had a walking group recently. We had an art group as well to help caregivers uncover some of their creative energies, which is another wonderful outlet for relieving caregiver stress. One of the biggest things that you can do as a caregiver is first understand what your needs are as a caregiver. What are the things that are challenging you? Are there things challenging you immediately? Are there things that you see sort of coming down the road at you? If there's one thing that would support you right now, what could it be? And then drawing up a list of what things you need support with. That list is a really integral first tool because as we build support around caregivers, we find that caregivers will go back to that list time and again to help them find ways that they can engage support. One of the things we encourage caregivers to try and do is create a support plan. We have comprehensive information on our website in the Learning Center of the website on how to build a caregiver support plan. We have a number of different tools and resources there. Creating a personal plan is driven by the caregiver. It's driven by your needs. It's tailored to what you think will give you the greatest support and reduce your emotional and physical stress. It's unique to every person, so there's not really a template that we can slap on it, but we do have a number of different tools that we put in place that are common to caregivers. So as an example, being engaged and informed, actively planning and managing your needs helps support desired outcomes. I spoke earlier this year in one of my Facebook Lives about the importance of building a plan every year. One of the reasons it helps me, I'm a caregiver myself, one of the reasons it helps me is because if I have a plan, I know what to expect, but I also build in time for things like self-care if I've planned ahead. So having clarity and taking action is also really important. If you understand what you need to do, it is so much easier to act around those things. It also helps you balance time and have more control of your time. And it helps you have flexibility in your plans. It also helps to allow for better communication. If you know what's going on, if you see what's in the plan, you can see where things are working, you can see where things aren't working, and you can see where you might need help or where you might need to communicate around changes. One of the factors that we often see with caregiving is that it's multidimensional and it is interconnected with all of the dimensions of wellness: physical, intellectual, spiritual, emotional, environmental, and social. Health is not the absence of disease, but it is actually the wellness in all of the dimensions of health. Caregivers tend to have decline in their physical health over time caregiving because it's a very physically exhausting activity, and it's an emotionally exhausting activity, which can lead to both emotional and physical fatigue symptoms. Caregivers have to get those needs met outside of their caregiving role, and so they need to work on making sure that they have outlets outside of their caregiving, that they maintain connection to friend groups, to support groups, to activities that are enriching to them so that they can return to caregiving with renewed energy and renewed emotional focus. Doing something that is important and enriching and creative for you will meet your needs in terms of intellectual, spiritual, emotional replenishment, and it will help you be a better caregiver. The challenge can be finding ways to get those needs met, especially if the person you're providing care for has a high level of needs or is difficult to be left alone. You have to arrange other support if you're going to take time away. It's important to engage all of the tools around you in your friendship group, in your family group, to be able to ensure that you're looking after yourself as best you can so that you can be the most effective caregiver that you can be. I had put a poll in here, but I think I'm just going to zoom past this poll. But I would like you to think about, instead of a poll, think about what the challenges you would see as a caregiver and where you might need help. Then what you're going to want to do is figure out, okay, I know where I need help. How am I going to ask for it? And that can be a first step towards expanding out into your community of care for yourself. When we look at the challenges that caregivers have reported, these are the 4 areas of challenge that regularly come up in surveys with us. They feel a lack of connection. They often feel very unsupported. They know that they need to engage respite, but they have trouble finding ways to make that happen. And sometimes it's very hard to keep perspective on one situation as a caregiver. So caregivers are often so busy and so consumed with all of the activities around caregiving that they're so busy juggling that they don't have time to see friends. They don't have time to take a class. They feel like they don't have time to do anything but be a caregiver, and few are available for friends. Often you neglect social health as caregiving always comes first. So asking for help is something most caregivers struggle with, mainly because in our society, value is placed highly on independence, and caregivers worry about being a burden or being perceived to be a burden to others. Caregiving is not something that can be accomplished alone, and it's best done as a group effort or a team effort. Everyone benefits if you engage support for yourself as a caregiver. And that's what we're trying to encourage folks to do here at Family Caregivers of BC. One of the ways that we can do this for caregivers is working with them to build a circle of care or a caregiving support team. A circle of care is a way that you can build a network around yourself that will support you as a caregiver so that you can support your care recipients. It provides a way to navigate crises as they come up. You have people that you can brainstorm with. You can have people you can turn to for ideas or perspective. It also reduces the demands on the healthcare system, because what tends to happen if caregivers remain in isolation is they will hit an emotional and physical wall and find themselves unable to be a caregiver or in need of care themselves. And then both the caregiver and the care recipient end up engaging the healthcare system, and that's just not productive for anyone in that grouping. Other ways that a circle of care can benefit caregivers is that it can address isolation that is a common experience to caregiving, just by getting out once a week for half an hour to have a coffee with someone. You've broken isolation, you're giving yourself a break, you're taking a bit of respite from the emotional demands that go along with caregiving, and you're giving yourself an outlet. You'll come back replenished and renewed and better able to handle the caregiving role as it comes into play. Having a circle of care around you can increase quality of life for yourself and for your care recipient, and it increases community capacity to engage in supporting around care. So in the act of building a circle of care for caregivers, one of the important things you need to do is identify needs and boundaries, and that's where that list I was talking about a bit earlier in the presentation comes up. This is where you pull that list out and say, okay, well, these are the things I need help with. Identifying boundaries is really important. Sometimes a boundary can be, I'm aging, I am no longer physically able to lift my care recipient from bed to chair or from chair to commode. And this can be a difficult realization, but knowing that you need help in this area, knowing that this is a line you can't cross without, for instance, causing injury to yourself, helps you be more open to the idea of creating a circle of support around you so that you can be a better caregiver and also better support your care recipient. So then you have to, once you've got your first list of needs and boundaries, you have to look at your community. Who in your community or your family can you approach for help? And then sometimes it's hard. You know that you've got the people you can turn to, but then asking is hard. It's always hard. We're a very independent society. Most of us don't like to feel like we need help or support, but we'll help you explore ways that you can ask and ways that you can broach those conversations. And what you often will find is when you reach out, people are more than happy to help. They've actually been thinking about you and wondering about ways that they can support you all along. And sometimes when we have caregivers balk at this idea, I don't want to ask people for help, I don't want to be a burden, we turn the table and we say, well, hey, look, if your sister said that she needed help with her father-in-law, would you help? And they often will say, oh, absolutely. Of course I would. Of course I would. Well, you know what? If you're willing to help someone, you can count on someone being willing to help you as well. And so we often encourage folks in that exploration piece to just consider, you'd want to help. So you can bet they'd want to help you, and it doesn't hurt to ask. And then you need to understand the value of strengthening those circles of support. Keep in mind that once you build a circle, you're going to want to keep that circle going, and you're going to want to keep it alive. So keep those connections, keep reaching out, keep engaging around all of those things. So when we're thinking about circles of relationship, what are the different circles of relationships that can exist for us within our lives? There's the circle of intimacy that exists between two partners, so two spouses where one is a caregiver and one is a care recipient. There's the circle of friendship that can consist of people who are friends or relatives to the person who's the caregiver and the person who is the care receiver. These are folks that can maybe give you a little bit of respite so you can go for coffee, go out for dinner, go watch a movie, go to a museum event, just take an afternoon off once a month. Then there's the circle of participation. These would be the folks that belong to organizations or associations that we participate with in life. These could be work-based, they could be faith-based, they could be interest-based, they could be community-based, they could be organizations like nonprofits who are there to provide support. Circle 3 may come along later in that process than Circle 1 or 2 if a relationship develops. Circle 3 is sort of categorized as that garden to grow those future relationships. So what you want to think about is, look to the folks who are closest to you, look to the folks who are a level out from that, and then keep looking. Never stop spending a little bit of time every month thinking, where else can I get some support? Who else out there can provide some support for me? And then there's paid support. That last circle of support is engaging services from organizations that are designed to provide support in a home setting. These can be things like paid nursing, paid care aides, paid social workers or psychologists to come in and provide support to you as a caregiver and to your care recipients. They can even be things like hairdressers or therapists, any number of different folks who would do a task that you can't do yourself. Many people have relationships across all of the circles that I've mentioned and have active lives that enable more and more folks to move into your circles of relationships and perhaps closer and closer in to the center of those circles. A caregiver can be vulnerable if they have only a few people in some of the circles. So what we want to do is encourage folks to constantly be looking at small ways that they can build and grow their circle, thinking about every connection they make and how that can help support their circle of care. So that's sort of a piece, a little bit of a description on how we help caregivers build circles of care. It is a process. It does take some planning and organization and thinking. We've trained facilitators to help us with helping caregivers do that work. And we find that it's super, super useful and very beneficial if you can build a circle around yourself as a caregiver. So how can you ask for help? Well, odds are folks in your family or folks in your friend group have asked, how can we help? And often the first response that caregivers will come up with is, no, I'm fine. Everything's fine. I don't need any help. Well, the truth is you do. And there are always things that can come off your list. So make a list of things, make a list of tasks, of activities that take up your time that you can maybe give to someone else. And so when someone calls or emails or reaches out to you and says, hey, how can I help? You've actually got a list handy and you can say, oh, well, you know what? I don't really have time to get the groceries today. So if I, give you some cash and my grocery list, can you go get them for me? Or something along the lines of, if you don't have someone that will be able to do that for you, many stores provide delivery services now or pickup services. And you can engage those instead of taking the time out of your day to go and do that task and then come home. Other ways that help can be provided are by doing light chores around your house. If you have a garden, helping with gardening or lawn care tasks, snow shoveling in the wintertime, picking up prescriptions or having a prescription delivery service set up for you instead. Even things as small as ordering a meal in instead of cooking can make a big difference. So you want to think about following up on people's offers to help, having a list of things so that you can give us specific things, being direct, just being honest and saying, you know what, I need help with this, this, and this. Can you take any of these off my list? And then appreciate and validate the people who provide you that help and support. They're there to help you, but it's always nice to reach out and thank them for the work that they do. And then don't hesitate to keep asking. It may be that the help that they can give you isn't exactly what you've asked for that time, but maybe down the road, they can help you in a different way. So keep asking. Connection is so important for caregivers to maintain. And by connection, I mean connection to your friend group, connection to your family relationship, connection to your community of support, because connection is the energy that exists between people when they feel seen and heard and valued. And when you can give and receive without judgment, and when you can get sustenance and strength from that connection, it is a very rewarding and invigorating and rejuvenating experience. So as caregivers, you want to make sure that you're fighting that tendency towards isolation and you're building connections wherever you can. So when it comes to the resources, education, and information that we offer at Family Caregivers, staff and volunteers are ready to help. You can call our caregiver support line for a one-to-one chat about your situation, and you can hear about resources, community support, and do an assessment for caregiver coaching if that's something that would be of value. You can also visit our website Learning Center, read articles, newsletters, watch webinars, listen to podcasts, see live videos, and explore the resources that we have available for you. So that, in a nutshell, is what we do at Family Caregivers of BC, and we're happy to listen to your story and give you support, guidance, or just an ear if you need it. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to me today, and please do reach out if you have any questions.